I dream of St. Patrick and Ireland. I dream of St. Patrick and Ireland, the land that I love and adore, where I was contented and happy till I left that lovely green shore.
Evolution, or to the violent upheaval of revolution. And Ireland has not been spared. We have seen here at home both evolution and revolution in our social and economic affairs, no less than in our political problems. In this our day,
Jack Industries to ensure that the new political independence was not undermined by foreign capital. As a result of economic stagnation, emigration figures remained staggeringly high. Under de Valera, there was no new incentive to stay at home. In 1841, the population of Ireland was 8.5 million. Today, it stands at 4 million. Moreover, emigration ruled out the chances of any serious anti-government activity. The Fianna Fáil were happy to see discontented Irishmen going to Britain and the United States, where they were left to dream of their distant homeland. In 1959, Ireland was revolutionized by a complete reversal in economic policy. De Valera retired to the presidential residence, and Mr. Sean Lemass took over leadership of the government. To develop commerce and industry, Lemass encouraged capital investment from abroad by grants and tax relief incentives. 200 British, American, and German firms were established. $185 million flowed into the country. In the last 10 years, the growth of Irish industry has been the fastest in Western Europe. Industrial exports rose from $80 million in 1958 to $440 million in 1968. For the first time, agricultural exports were surpassed by industrial exports. The industrial boom has trebled total Irish income from abroad. Industrialization changed the whole face of Ireland. In a brief 10 years, a modern technological society replaced the old agrarian way of life. It is remarkable that the Industrial Revolution came to Ireland a century after the rest of Europe. The numbers at work in agriculture dropped by 40%. People flowed into the city and emigration figures fell. Industry provided thousands of new jobs, and to earn a steady wage was a new experience for many Irishmen. Modern apartment blocks were erected to house the increasing urban population. This rabbit warren in Dublin, called Ballymun, provides accommodation for several thousand people. The new breed of urbanized peasants, herding together in places like Ballymun, generally felt that the new way of life, with a steady wage, central heating, and all modern conveniences, was a vast improvement on what they and their deprived ancestors had grown accustomed to over the centuries. How long have you been living here?
Almost 2 years now.
And do you like it here?
I do, I like it very well.
You're very happy?
I am,
You
yes.
have lots of friends?
Plenty of friends and no complaints.
Is it better than places you've been living before?
Oh, much better.
Why?
Well, we have a lot here. In the hall over here, it's a hall for teenagers. They have their dances on a Saturday night. And
Which is this hall?
The small little
It's
hall.
that old building.
The old hall, yes. And
They're going to build a new one, is it?
Oh, yes, they are, yes. On a Sunday afternoon, they have films for the children, and on a Sunday night, there's bingo.
Yes.
If we want to go to it.
Yes. And what you were pointing at something downstairs?
The people living here have formed a social club.
Yes, where's that?
It's downstairs.
Can you show it to us?
Yes.
You lived previously in Dublin?
Well, when I was married first, I lived in East Wall, but I don't come from Dublin myself.
You're outside.
I'm from Donegal.
Yes. And where is the social club?
Just down here with the children, right?
Where they're singing now?
Yeah.
Warriors both of course. One little captain had a mishap, broke off his horse's head. With the
Have you got a shopping centre?
We have shop down just over there.
Where, can you point it out again?
It's over here to the left.
It's not finished yet.
No, it's not finished yet, but there's still quite a lot of shops there.
What can you get there? Everything you want?
Yes, well, it's a vegetable shop, and there's a chemist, there's a supermarket, and a butcher shop, and draper shop, and a shoe shop.
How much does your husband earn in a
Average
week?
£33 a week.
Sorry? £30.
Yeah.
What does he do?
Painter.
He's a painter, and he
Yeah.
works in Dublin.
Well, he's employed by a Dublin firm, but at the moment he's in the country working.
Yes. You have all the modern conveniences here. Do you
have.
have everything you want, all
Yeah.
the comforts. Is there anything you really need?
Well, a washing machine.
You haven't
I
got
do.
it.
I haven't got one, no.
This is your next item.
My next item on the list.
And what about television?
I have my television.
It's nice to dream about pleasant things, like drawing a horse in the Sweet Lincoln, which romps home at Doncaster and wins you one of the many big prizes of £50,000.
The new society was based on free enterprise and the profit motive. The old carefree attitude to life was gone. Everyone set out to feather his nest, firmly accepting the belief that the more you have, the happier you'll be. Those who felt they weren't getting a fair share of the cake quickly learned to complain and demand more. Their demands produced higher wages, which made prices rise, and the complaints grew louder still.
Since you got married, has the cost of living in Ireland changed?
I certainly say it has changed. Sure, I think it has trebled the price, what it was. We have our butter, it's 5 shillings a pound, and it's home produced. In fact, everything that we produce is dearer. We have the wheat. We produce our own wheat, but our bread is the dearest, of course. 2 and a penny for £2 loaf. Now, footwear for children, clothes for children. Actually, I don't know what hasn't gone up. Now, it's not easy when you go back after doing 8-week school holidays. They need clothes. They need everything. You may as well start from the skin out to start redressing. And you have to turn around then, you have the problem of the books. I want this for me books. I want that much for me books. Well, that goes all right. About 4 months afterwards. Will you stop the noise, please? I can't hear him. Stop easy. So, where do you start? You literally, as far as I see, you just work, at least the husband just works. He brings it in today, and he nearly wants to bring the same amount in about 2 days after that.
The basic wage is £16.15 a week. And some men have only 8 guineas a week. That's all they have. They've only got 8 guineas a week, some men. Some unfortunate men. And that's how a lot of them had to take the money. And as I said before, there was men here who took £300 and £350 and drank it. Walk up the quay.
Our wages ranges from £19.19. Of course, I don't think any working man is satisfied. Investors have money invested in the company. A working man has his life invested in any company, particularly if he is there for a good number of years. So I think he's entitled to look for money, look for what he can get for his labour. Who's going to decide what is a sufficient level of income going into the working people's home? The working class, ordinary working man, the fact, the man who's doing the work. He's entitled to be supported and have the same luxuries as his employer.
Such playgrounds as the Royal St George Yacht Club in Dunleary were at one time the exclusive preserve of the British overlords and the Anglo-Irish landed gentry. But today, this cocktail party brings together the increasingly powerful Irish middle class, made up of professional people, successful merchants, and prosperous farmers. During the 1960s, these people came to form the backbone of the Fianna Fáil party. Since the Mass gave new life to the country's economy, resourceful Irishmen have been impressed by the party's air of enterprise and affluence. They felt that Fianna Fáil controlled the significant opportunities for advancement and prosperity. And for those who are already successful in business, the possibility of entering the political arena as a rising star of Fianna Fáil seemed to be a justifiable reward for adventurous hard work. All these people have reaped the benefits of the new Ireland, and they obviously hope that nothing will happen to threaten their position in the future. Michael Scott, architect, businessman, and patron of the arts.
Yes, I do support the government party. I think they're a middle-of-the-road party. They're neither over-conservative or over-ambitious in doing things too quickly. I don't see any great political changes.
Gordon Lambert is head of many organisations, including Jacob's Biscuits, Dublin Tourism, and the Electricity Supply Board. He is a committee member of the Dublin Theatre Festival.
I owe a lot to my liberal education in Dublin University and my specialised training in the field of chartered accountancy.
Do you support the governing party at the moment in Ireland?
Well, I do, because I think we've had a very stable government which has led certainly during the 60s to the tremendous growth in the Irish economy. I think it's one of the best in Europe.
Do you think there'll be a change in the government at all?
I don't, because talking from the position of a managing director who studies a government from a management point of view, I think the initiative and progressive attitude of the individuals in the government party will ensure and is ensuring that they'll have a government structure that will be difficult to match within the 70s.
To those who didn't make the upper echelons or who rejected the whole philosophy of the party, the Fianna Fáil has become the prime object of their resentment and abuse.
George, I believe you live in Ballymun.
I do, that's the new town, you know.
What sort of job do you do?
I mix dough for biscuits.
Is Jacob's Biscuits?
Jacob's Biscuits, yeah.
We interviewed Mr. Lambert.
Oh, no, I had the pleasure of meeting him.
Do you support the government party?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because they're not what they claim they were. The Republican, they are, to me anyway, strictly conservative party.
Can you illustrate this?
Well, they seem to bike the big business all the time.
They back big business?
They bike big business, yeah. Sure, it's made up of big businessmen.
In the past, it was not uncommon for a rich and poor man to be seen together in the same pub, enjoying a joke at the expense of Oliver Cromwell and the British. But today, rich and poor have separated into mutually exclusive communities. They no longer have any interests in common, nor do they enjoy the same pastimes. The division in the modern society is based not simply on economic differences. There is a complete breakdown of cultural unity as well.
Stand. We'll go to Holly Hill, which is just down the road that way, about half a mile. We'll be drawing generally in a circle around.
This meeting of the Kildare Hunt takes place at the country home of Colonel and Mrs. Clements. The hosts serve drinks to members before the fox hunt begins.
Well, the hunt has been in existence since about 1780, and we've hunted continuously ever since then.
And it meets every morning, various houses.
The size of the country, it's about the whole of County Kildare and parts of County Wicklow and even a little bit of County Meath.
How many people about?
How many people will come out?
Yes.
Well, perhaps be 30 or 35 out today.
Most of the Saturdays, isn't it?
More people perhaps come out on Saturdays than on Tuesdays.
Could you tell us how many days a week the hunt runs?
Well, we meet 4 days a week.
So most people really do it 4 days a week?
Oh, no. Most people will only come out 1 or 2 days a week, but the hounds will be out 4 days a week because the country covers a very large area.
Colonel Clements, are you Irish?
Yes, I was born in County Kildare 65 years ago.
Do you think there are class differences in Ireland?
Oh, there is a vast difference in relation to classes here. We have a big gulf between the haves and the have-nots. There's a vicious class distinction policy here.
Do you think people are aware of this?
Well, some people are aware, some are not. I think the whole thing in relation to the class distinction is really education.
But at the present moment, we're heading towards what I call a democratic dictatorship, if you could call it that, by one party, by a minority of people in government who are telling us what to do every day of the week and saying it's for the common good. National revolutions, quite obviously, do cut across the class struggle to the extent that workers, middle class and the establishment castes generally find the motive force of the struggle for national independence transcending the natural class divisions within capitalist society, and in Ireland this was very pronounced, and I think this is apparent in quite a lot of Asian and African countries now coming to political and national independence. The class issues are dulled, but do re-emerge when the true nature of the new society is exposed. This is happening on an increasingly large scale in the Republic of Ireland. The old blurred class lines are now beginning to emerge. They have already arrived in rather large form on the industrial scene, as the militancy of the unions will testify.
The people's attitude to politics has become more critical during the economic and social upheavals of the 60s. Civil war loyalties are no longer the key to Irish politics. Sensitivity to status led people to re-examine their position in society. For the first time in history, Irishmen have begun to concern themselves with political theory. Divisions in the society produced divisions in politics, and the right-left confrontation which began in the last decade must come to a head in the 70s.
Right, who likes the Prime Minister?
None of us! None of us!
Who likes the IRA?
We want the IRA!
And finally, we would make the point that the reason why we have come here is because we believe that injustice in Ireland knows no border.
In order to come to terms with the modern situation in Ireland, all the opposition parties shifted their policies towards the left. United in their defiance of Fianna Fáil, they nevertheless competed with each other as champions of the growing discontent.
Republic in Ireland.
This is the annual General Conference of the Irish Labour Party. Until recently, the Labour Party has been retreating from the ideals of its socialist founder, James Connolly, prepared to compromise and seek coalition with other parties in its hunger for power. But in 1966, the party reverted to a more definite socialist policy. The Labour Party, more than any other, is the party most suited to the needs and demands of industrial workers. The rising support for Labour in the 60s, especially in the cities, makes it the greatest threat to the Fianna Fáil government in the future. The leader of the party, Brendan Corish, outlined some aspects of his policy document.
Briefly, I would say this, of course, we're, needless to remark, a socialist party. Our policies are designed to ensure the involvement of people in decision-making, and particularly workers and the farmers. We believe that a worker in any industry, in any factory, he's the most important element in it. We don't believe that his fate, so to speak, in wages and hours, conditions of employment, should be determined by those who are on the board of directors or those who invested money in it. He's the most important man in the industry, and we believe that he should have a say in decision-making within his factory. Involvement would be the keynote. It doesn't mean to say, should I emphasize, that we want to nationalize all the land. No, we do not. It doesn't necessarily mean to say we want to nationalize all the industries. There are some industries that are named there which we think should be nationalized, but we don't want to go berserk. But we want to see that this country and the resources of this country are used to the utmost extent for the benefit of the people.
That Fianna Fáil is indifferent to the needs of the poorer sectors of Irish society is the opinion of Dr. Noel Brown of the Labour Party.
We still haven't solved the problems that exist in any normal society, problems such as housing. There are thousands of people who are homeless, who require houses in the city of Dublin and the other cities and towns in Ireland, are living in overcrowded conditions. Our educational system is orientated toward the education of an elite, in which the working class child is excluded. The care of old people has been the greatest effect of all, because on the allowances which we pay to old people here, it leads to severe malnutrition, and most of them die, if not of hunger, certainly in hunger. So that the figure has been a pretty comprehensive one as far as the government has been concerned.
It's the only party for the working class in particular, not alone the working class, but anyone who cares about Ireland economically, socially and otherwise.
What party do you support? What political party?
Me? I support the Labour Party.
And you, sir?
The Labour Party.
Labour Party.
Labour Party.
Labour, and it'll be always Labour.
In the ranks of the Fianna Fáil government, the young politician David Andrews is called the golden boy of Irish politics. He doesn't believe that Labour have the support of the vast majority of workers.
Well, you use a very emotive type word, vast. This clearly indicates then that you've interviewed every worker in the country, or the majority of workers in the country. Am I right in this?
No.
Well, then...
In our interviews that we've done at random, most of them have been supporters of the Labour Party.
Yes, well, it depends on where you... Well, of course, the Labour Party always say that they get the support of the workers. If the Labour Party feel that they get the support of the workers, it certainly isn't reflected in the ballot boxes at election time. So it's clear that the Fianna Fáil Party have always held the support of the workers. We have, of course, a tremendous trade union wing within the Fianna Fáil Party, and we are proud of this. We, unlike the Labour Party, appeal to all sections of the community. We don't go in for socialist shibboleths and terms like class struggle. They're, with the greatest of respects, meaningful in the mouths of supporters and members of the Labour Party, but meaningless, I think, in the mouths of other reasonable people.
One has often heard tell of the fighting Irish. Right up to the present day, the fiery spirit of Ireland has found expression in the fervent and mysterious Irish Republican Army. Every year at Boddenstown Cemetery near Dublin, the IRA commemorate the death of Wolfe Tone, the hero of the 1798 rebellion against the English. After the Civil War, the Republican movement went against de Valera, feeling that he had betrayed the ideals of 1916. Their objectives were to drive the British out of Northern Ireland. For years they engaged in skirmishes with troops in the north, gaining nothing and losing credibility and sympathy. Their last campaign in 1956 was so disastrous that it was taken for granted that the IRA had been extinguished. Ireland's political awakening in the 60s brought the Republican movement back to life. The leaders laid greater stress on socialist ideas and became actively involved in civil rights. Political demonstrations and involvement in social issues all over Ireland, north and south of the border, are the essentials of the new Republican spirit. Thomas McGilla is the leader of the IRA and the entire Republican movement.
The objective of the Irish Republican Army is still the objective of the 1916 rebellion, which was basically, it had two purposes. Separatism, to break the connection with England, which is the historic fight of the Irish people for independence, freedom, political and economic freedom. And secondly, control of the economic resources of the country, in other words, the establishment of a socialist republic in which the Irish people would have freedom of action and in which the people, rather than an elite few, would have control over the resources of the nation and the distribution of these resources. This objective, of course, wasn't achieved in any part of the country. It's said that 26 counties are free, but in no sense does the 26 county structure or political system or economic system come in any way compare with the objectives of the 1916 rebellion, the objectives of Connolly and of Pearse. The fight is for the ownership of the country. Those who own and control it at the moment are going to use force to maintain their control, therefore force will have to be used to overthrow them. The Irish Republican Army has in the past fought British imperialism by attacking British occupation forces in the country. They are now more significantly a part of the general movement against imperialism in its neo-colonial aspects down here in the 26 counties as well as the troops in the north. It does, for instance, oppose the takeover of large farms by foreigners and burned a number of houses in Meath, and it also opposed an American trawler in Galway Bay, which was interfering with the rights of the fishermen and the lobster fishers.
How many men are under arms?
Well, I couldn't give you a figure of that, but I can say that it is organised in every county in Ireland. There are units of the Irish Republican Army in every county.
Do you have arms and ammunition?
Oh yes, you cannot have an army without having some equipment.
What kind of arms?
Well, again, I couldn't give you any idea of what the armaments of the IRA are.
Are men undergoing regular training?
Oh, certainly, yes. It's the purpose of the army, is to train men.
The IRA is illegal in Ireland, and only in exceptional circumstances will Republicans use it to carry out acts of violence, such as the destruction of German-owned farms and an American trawler. The Republican movement relies more on peaceful protest through its legally constituted Sinn Féin party.
British rule in Ireland has always been the main cause of our problems.
The British Embassy in Dublin is an old Sinn Féin stamping ground.
Distribution of literature by law, literature that could only reconcile the people in the north and not inflame them, as some of the literature allowed to be distributed does. This is why we are here tonight protesting at the British Embassy.
Our objective is the reconquest of Ireland from the ground landlords, the river barons, the speculators, cartels, monopolies, and the struggle against them will now be intensified. If need be, we must be prepared to win back our country, farm by farm, river by river, mine by mine, shop by shop, and factory by factory.
McGilla addresses the annual general meeting of the Republican movement, gathered together under the legal guise of the Sinn Féin party. Members of Sinn Féin who are elected to the Dáil do not take their seats as a method of political protest. But the movement intends to abandon its abstentionist policy to seek a wider platform for socialist action.
In good time for the general election.
What party do you support?
Sinn Féin, the Republican movement.
Could you tell us what?
Yeah, because their policies appeal to me.
Are they communist or socialist?
Socialist. Yeah. Strictly, they're not communist, they're socialist.
And what are their policies with regards...
Well, what Conley and the rest wanted, that Ireland should have control of our own natural resources. Everything, from the ground out, up.
What do you think of the IRA?
We have no commitments at all.
As far as the IRA is concerned, and the way I look upon the IRA, I suppose the man who gets up in the morning and worries about Ireland and that. I get up in the morning, I have to worry about a wife and children. You know what I mean? But I suppose they mean well in their own way. They have a party too, and they've done a lot for people who are homeless and one thing and another in the city of Dublin. The Sinn Féin, they've gone around and they went into houses, haven't they? And they try to house people and try to do something for the people. As far as I can see, they are progressive.
It is incredible to see in 1970 that we still have in this country the slave-mind Irishman willing to prostitute himself in the service of the foreign landlord. And it is this degradation of Irishmen that our National Waters Restoration League wants to put an end to.
On the property of Lord Mount Charles, who owns the fishing rights on a large stretch of the River Boyne, the Sinn Féin stage a fish-in to campaign for the public ownership of Ireland's rivers and lakes. Along with involvement in housing and civil rights, the fish-in is an example of an intensive attempt to put socialism into action.
Publicly owned fisheries will give decent employment to Irishmen and will not ask them to degrade themselves in the service of the foreigner. And it is they who should also support the National Water League in its demand for public ownership.
Partition is more than just a border, more than an artificially made and artificially maintained barrier, more than just an economically disruptive division, more than just a culturally divisive influence, more than just an historical affront. Partition is a deep, throbbing wheel across the land, heart and soul of Ireland, an imposed deformity whose indefinite perpetuation eats into the Irish consciousness like a cancer.
The continued presence of the British in the north is distasteful to everyone in Ireland. But although feelings run high on the subject, there's little any political party can do by peaceful means. In the eyes of ardent nationalists, Lynch's speeches are mere firework displays for election propaganda. This was confirmed in May 1970, when Lynch sacked 2 members of his cabinet, Blaney and Haughey, accusing them of wanting to use force to solve the problems of Northern Ireland. McGilla calls Lynch's bluff.
The way is gradually being prepared for the imposition of Britain's final solution on the Irish people. It would be more honest with the Irish people, and especially with their own party members, if Mr. Lynch and his colleagues in Fianna Fáil, those who have finally and formally abandoned the objectives of an independent republic and who believe in federation with Britain, it would be more honest if they would form a federal party to advance their ideas rather than to continue to advance them behind the cloak of republicanism.
But the eruption of street fighting in Northern Ireland in 1968 coincided with the change to civil rights protests within the IRA. McGilla is reluctant to use force to solve the problems of the North. Experience has proved this method to be unconstructive. The conflicts in the north have caused a split in the IRA. Many members disliked Magilla's move to peaceful protest and broke away to form the Provisional Army Council. This group believes guns are necessary to defend the people of the north from the police and the British Army. Since the beginning of 1971, they have made numerous lightning attacks on British troops, and a number of soldiers have been killed. These tactics are in the spirit and tradition of Irish republicanism, and as a result, the Provisional Army claim they are the genuine Sinn Féin IRA.
You have mentioned that we are what you would call a breakaway party, but we wouldn't agree with that. We maintain that we are the Sinn Féin organisation.
Sean O'Brady, leader of the Provisionals, accuses Magilla of diverting civil rights away from military action.
The policymakers within the Republican movement, the masterminds, decided that it should be otherwise and got the civil rights movement to change around completely their policy on this in this regard. Now we believe that ultimately the enemy is Britain, and the responsibility for the situation in the 6 counties and for the whole situation in Ireland rests in Westminster. And anything that brings about a direct confrontation with Westminster is much more desirable than fighting with brother Irishmen in the north.
The men in this group live by the law of the gun. Old Republicans like Joe Clark fought in the 1916 revolution and are still living in the memory of those glorious days. To them, no gunfire in Ireland indicates patriotic negligence and breeds deep distrust for Magilla's brand of socialism.
A brand of extreme socialism was being pushed on the movement by this group, which we felt would result eventually in the setting up of a totalitarian dictatorship similar to those which exist in Eastern Europe, and something that we do not want.
Are you militarily prepared?
Well, there will be a need for an organisation, a military organisation, which will defend the rights of the Irish people and defend Irish freedom, yes.
In 1966, when de Valera celebrated the 60th anniversary of the revolution, Joe Clark was carried away from the ceremony, kicking and shouting accusations of treachery in front of the television cameras. Today, well in his 80s, he stands over Wolfe Tone's grave and looks down at the tombstone blown to pieces by Protestant militants from Northern Ireland. For Joe Clark and the Provisional Army, the fight has never ended. After 40 years, the largest opposition party in Ireland is still Fine Gael, holding 30% of parliamentary seats. Fine Gael has managed to survive on the support of voters whose loyalties go back to their parents' stand on partition. As the party that agreed to the partition of Ireland, Fine Gael inherited a distinctly conservative Anglo-Irish image. But in the light of recent changes in Ireland, the party risks becoming a political victim. Today, Fine Gael finds itself falling between two stools, with Fianna Fáil on one side and the Labour Party on the other. Before the 1965 elections, Fine Gael made a desperate attempt to find a role for itself in modern Ireland. The party shook off its conservative heritage and adopted the program called the Just Society, which was designed to win over youth and the intelligentsia. But the new tactics have not been successful. Fine Gael has developed a somewhat schizophrenic character, a curious mixture of liberalism and austerity. At a time when the electorate is being forced to choose between a socialist and a capitalist Ireland, the Fine Gael must inevitably lose supporters to Labour and to Fianna Fáil. Garrett Fitzgerald, Shadow Minister of Education, is one of the prime motivators of the Just Society programme.
I think broadly could be said to stand for social reform and for greater participation of people in the running of the country and in the running of their own affairs, in favour of gradual reform rather than revolution, I can assure you, and in favour of social justice, a far greater measure of social justice than now exists. Now, no one doubts that this is difficult, and certainly it's not something to replace parliamentary democracy, but something to strengthen and improve it. Parliamentary democracy is essential, I think, to the preservation of freedom. It is, however, inadequate in many respects in not giving people a sufficient voice in the things that affect their own lives. We have to build into the system of parliamentary democracy, or add on to it, or superimpose on it, a system of participation of people in the farm, in the factory, in local government, and education. And this is what I think our party is particularly concerned to achieve.
The PD in the north has given the lead to the people of Ireland. So it was someone from the north today who was arrested. Police today seem to think that the people from the north are troublemakers. And so they are, because they are going to make trouble for the so-called Republicans Fianna Fáil in the south. They're going to show us the way.
The increasing political involvement of youth in the Republic is largely inspired by the considerable impact of the youth movement in Northern Ireland. This meeting in Dublin after a rugby match between Ireland and the Springboks is held under the banner of the People's Democracy. The PD is the most forceful group in the Northern Ireland civil rights movement. It was the PD that was largely responsible for getting Bernadette Devlin into Westminster. Whenever they can, the leaders come down to Dublin to spread the fire of civil rights into the Republic. Behind them, they have an impressive record of success in forcing the government in the north to instigate programs of reform.
The lesson which they have learned from the people in the north, and particularly the people of Bogside.
Inspired by the PD and leaders like Bernadette Devlin, the youth of the Republic are coming out, as everywhere else in the world, to challenge the values of established society.
To fight against oppression all over the world.
This building in Hume Street, Dublin, was occupied for many months by students. There is a desperate shortage of housing in the city, so the students took over and repaired this Georgian house in order to protest against the demolition of inhabitable buildings to make way for office blocks. The Hume Street squatters are a perfect example of ardent and lucid Irish students.
I've taken several notes, but I'd like to ask some personal questions. I'll start with you. Why are you here?
I'm here because I want these buildings preserved. These buildings are structurally sound. We need houses in Dublin. This is part of a city where 10,000 people are homeless. I think these buildings should be used by these people. I put people before profit. That's just simply why I'm here.
Well, when you say that you've business before people before profit, you realise that you could also be slowing down the progress of property.
The fact is that exploitation, there's a lot of exploitation in this country from the point of view of exploitation of our environment, our heritage, our housing, our land. Everything is being exploited, and a lot of it has been done by foreign exploiters. And the issue here is just an example. It's Hume Street, and it's an example of the exploitation that's happening all over the country. It's definitely a national issue.
And it's not just happening in a city. It's happening out around the edge of the country. People go out and they buy an acre of land for £50, you know. And 10 years' time, they sell it for 24,000. And of course, with that, people can't buy houses. So the people who can buy houses have to stay in flats, or who would buy houses have to stay in flats. And the people who can't buy houses can't get a flat to move into, because people who, you know...
Well, you're talking about outside Irish investments as well, buying property.
It's mostly office development.
Most of the office blocks in the city are owned by outside investors.
And city wouldn't come.
No.
St. Patrick's Cathedral was built in 1190. St. Patrick, who came to Ireland in 432, had a little church here. There was a well, and he used to baptize people. During the Cromwellian Wars of 1649, the church was used to stable Cromwell's horses. The most important thing about St. Patrick's Cathedral is the fact that Jonathan Swift was dean here from 1713 to 1745. We're now coming down by the Liffey, which is the river going through the city of Dublin. The Liffey is 73 miles long, and along the Liffey there are 9 bridges.
Is toch Raeburn?
Real Gaelic culture, as opposed to mere tourist attraction, is republican by nature. Gaelic culture is at the very heart of Irish traditions and Irish nationalism, as in this republican stronghold, Slattery's Pub in Dublin. The singer is a supporter of Sinn Féin. The translation of Sinn Féin is ourselves alone. In every walk of life, people are fighting to resist the ailments of modern society. The struggle is for personal freedom and human individuality. Survival against the forces of mass production and mass technology is only one aspect of the problem. The more immediate need is to resist the controls placed on the individual by management, the politicians, and the clergy. The mass media is a classic nerve center in the confrontation between the individual and the corporation. TV producers Jack Dowling and Lelia Doolan were fired from Television for resisting management directives. They wrote the book Sit Down and Be Counted, which created a considerable stir in 1969.
The station has been under constant pressure from the government, from commercial interests. Programs were emasculated. The administration of programs was interfered with constantly, and the production staff naturally looked to management to keep the government and the commercial interests off their backs, so that the radio and television could exercise the ordinary prerogatives of media in a free country. This was a losing fight. And finally, the Director General, with the approval of the authority, reorganized radio and television to the point where it was impossible to get programs on the air that had any bearing on public affairs, on politics, and on national economic and social policy.
Gin flip, blouse, sash. All there, washed and ready for school next week. Huh? So is she, by the look of it. Come on, out.
The situation in the station reflects in small what's going on in the society outside. And that is that we've now got a technological society in Ireland. It's not the bare-faced fascist dictatorship of the Industrial Revolution anymore. It's a much more subtle and refined form of manipulation where the forces, the vested interests, namely political and commercial interests, who wish to maintain the status quo as it stands, use the forces of technology to keep disruptive elements in their place. This is what happened in television, this is what we saw as happening in television, and this is what's happening in the society in general. And a priest who drew attention to audiences in Ireland to the fact that they ought to be more critical of news presentation was not allowed to have his program transmitted.
Good night. On February 15th next, first Sunday of Lent, the new rite of Mass will be introduced.
But we're more concerned with the Catholic Church and its influence. It has consistently opposed any social change, radical change at all in the country. It has been the most militant defender of capital, and with all its grave defects in our society over the years. It has resisted social change, as I said, resisted the development of education. When we did get education, it insisted on taking over education and indoctrinating the youngsters so that they ended their education at the age of 14 years, semi-literate. But whatever they did believe was right-wing and conservative and so on. They then insisted on educating an elite, and that elite then became the professional people, practically exclusively conservative doctors, lawyers, engineers, industrialists, and so on, who went out into our society. And they determined the quality of life. They've determined the fact that we have had the classical obscurantist, authoritarian, arrogant, right-wing conservatism of the Catholic Church, which you've seen in places like Portugal and Spain, South American republics, and so on.
Why is it not? Why don't you take on the responsibility of baptism? Because you're only a child, naturally not. Because you're only a child.
All primary and secondary schools, with rare exceptions, are run by the Catholic Church. The Church pays 1/3 of educational costs, the state the other 2/3.
So the priest is in God's place. It's not a place. He doesn't say, in the name of Jesus Christ, I have drawn you. He said, I have drawn you.
There can be no political change in Ireland without a complementary change within the Church. However, there are notable signs of transformation within the priesthood. Greater emphasis is now being placed on the social and political aspects of morality. Many priests are actively concerned about such problems as social injustice, profiteers, crooked politicians, sadistic school teachers, and the poor and homeless. The importance of the new priest is paramount in the evolution of the country. He is still the guiding light of the majority of people, and as such can be far more effective than the politician. Father O'Connor is a Dominican priest and a lecturer in philosophy at University College, Dublin.
Personally, I put my hopes in the Labour Party at the present moment. There is also the Sinn Féin Party, which is the left-wing, extremely left-wing, radical Republican Socialist Party. The unfortunate thing about the Sinn Féin Party is, of course, that they're an abstentionist party,
yes,
and this minimises any effective role that they can play in the actual political structures. They are playing a very great role in highlighting social problems, in awakening social consciousness, and so on. But personally, I should like to see them enter into the parliamentary system. And if they did, perhaps then Labour and Sinn Féin may very well merge in some kind of consensus or other eventually.
How do you see the future of the Church in Ireland?
In Ireland, well, I would distinguish between the institution of the Church and the Church as just a people. But if you take the Church in a much wider sense as the people, then I believe that it may well be the catalyst of the future in Ireland. Since Vatican II, there is a much greater social consciousness, as it were, developing within the official Church. This has affected priests, and above all, of course, it has affected the younger clergy.
So inevitably, there must be a conflict between the government and the Church.
I think this is inevitable. As far as I'm concerned, I see the role of the Church in politics as having a responsibility continually to criticize the system, to point out the defects of the system, to fight against injustice, social injustice, possible injustice all the time, to review.
Do you believe that there is any chance of a united left-wing movement posing a serious threat to the government?
Well, there's no evidence of a left-wing movement in this country at this point in time, and when it would emerge, then I'd probably be able to comment on the question.
There's a lot of talk of the United Liberation Front, members of the Labour Party.
Yes, I appreciate that. You see, I don't know where you have been. You say that you've been over here for the past 3 weeks, and who have you been with, for instance? I mean, where have you been getting all this information from? I'm not familiar with this now, and I've been in Irish politics for nigh on 15 years, and
well, from the opposition party.
Yes. Well, their claims are unfounded.
Bernadette Devlin's objective is to awaken the consciousness of the people all over Ireland. On a tour of the Republic, she addresses the crowd at Ennis in County Clare. They listen and they don't miss a word.
People in 1916 died so that the west of Ireland could become a playground for American rich. So that the west of Ireland could become prostituted for people who would come up and watch them.
speak their native language as if they were freaks for doing it. Is that what people fought and died for?
Every night at sunset, thousands of starlings come from all over Dublin to sleep in the roof of this ruined theatre. Now the building is being pulled down. The old makes way for the new. The starlings have had to leave, driven away by the forces of change. At the beginning of the century, the Irish drove the British out of the country in an attempt to renovate the entire structure and purpose of the society. The revolutionary generation dreamed, preached, and lived the ideals of change. But the Irish leaders who replaced the British did not give the people the freedom and prosperity they had hoped for. Now the wheels of change begin to turn again. And as many of the people look hopefully to the future, the artist Brian Burke revives the harsh words of Yeats and Joyce, children of the 1916 revolution and Ireland's greatest poets.
Hooray for revolution and more cannon shots. A beggar on horseback lashing the beggar on foot. Hooray for revolution and cannon come again. The beggars have changed places, but the lash goes on. But I owe a duty to Ireland. I hold her honour in my hand. This lovely land that always sent for writers and artists banishment, and in the spirit of Irish fun betrayed her own leaders one by one. Was Irish humour wet and dry, flung quick lime into Parnell's eye? His Irish brains that saved from doom the leaky barge of the Bishop of Rome? For everyone knows the Pope can't belch without the consent of Billy Welch. Ireland, my first and only love, for Christ and Caesar are hand in glove.